Hello and welcome to the weekly astrology and spirituality show with Patrick and Elisa Arundel for week commencing the 26th of April. It's a really important week, of course. We have the supermoon in the sign of Scorpio on Tuesday, and that's going to be interacting with an aspect, a planetary angle, which has been going on between the two rulers of Aquarius, Saturn and Uranus, since about the middle of January. So this could be a week that creates quite a lot of tremors and shocks in lots of different ways. Elisa, what about the Hermetic Wheel?
Well,
what's the implications of that?
Pop that wheel on the screen. So as you can see from the wheel on the screen, we are still in the same decan that we were in sort of the middle to the end of last week. And this is how our decans work, because you know, they last longer than a week in layman's terms.
Yeah, so it's about 10 days.
So the decan that we're in until Saturday is still that Five of Pentacles energy. And we were saying last week that the Five of Pentacles can be very much about a lack mentality. It's very closely linked to how we view our finances or our material world. But what we didn't really mention last week is that it can also be about worry, something building up inside of us. So I really think that that old saying that a problem shared is a problem halved is going to be important this week. Sometimes we carry things by ourselves because we don't want to burden other people, we want to protect them, we don't want to worry them, we want to sort it out ourselves. But actually, this energy can really be lifted if we just share the problem, however uncomfortable that may be, and that way everything's out open on the table and we can move forwards with things. But as we move into Saturday, we have a much lighter energy. We're going to be moving into that Six of Pentacles energy, which is about charity, sharing and giving. So it could be
benevolence.
Benevolence, that's right.
Benefactors.
Yeah, so sharing our problems actually with someone this week may pay off towards the end of the week with some help in some way.
That's brilliant. I love the way that's changing. I mean, in the astrology, the first 10 degrees of Taurus is ruled by Venus, the second 10 is ruled by Mercury, and the third 10 degrees by Saturn. So if you are a Taurus, the chances are, if you're born in that last 10 degrees, you are someone who's going to be quite astute about resources. If you're born in the first 10 degrees, you're probably someone who enjoys the good things in life, you know, because Venus in Taurus, the ruler, is very much about more sensual pleasures, whereas Venus as its ruler of Libra is more about the relating, the relationship side of things. And then the middle decan, the next 10 degrees, Mercury, of course, is about communication. So lots of things going on. Now, of course, we've got that stunning supermoon on Tuesday, but that's in Scorpio. If we think about the overall celestial picture, the sign of Taurus, where the sun is, very close to the destructive energies of Uranus, is house 2. And on the other side of the heavens, where that Scorpio supermoon occurs, that's house 8. Now that's concerned, obviously, Scorpio with sometimes secrets, sometimes things that are going on out of sight. The modern ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. And Pluto, of course, is about transformations, but it can be about plots, can be about the dark arts. And I think we are going to see over the next couple of weeks quite a lot of stuff come into the open from this full moon, or this lunation, which is going to flag up some things that have been kept quiet or kept hidden are going to come into the surface. And I think some of them are going to be like a bit of a battle between people's different values. So the second house in Taurus can be about our core values. The 8th house is about where we're most invested and committed, sometimes to somebody else in a personal or even intimate context. Sometimes the 8th house in a more prosaic way is about our long-term resources, things like savings, pensions, insurances, investments, that kind of stuff. So what's the implication of that Uranus location right next to the position of the sun? Well, really, it's because this lunation actually interacts with the square that's been going on between Uranus and Saturn since about the second week of January, and it's going to go on through to July this year. So that has been creating a lot of strain. If we think what's going on in India, which is just awful. There is a lack of oxygen. If we think that Uranus is in the sector of resources, and there's an unpredictability to the way COVID can suddenly pick up energy again and spread. And then we've got Saturn in its restrictive context in an air sign. We have a lack of oxygen. Now, some people would say, well, that's easy to kind of make that link. But of course, it's all to do with every time politicians or planners or health professionals switch out of planning for COVID in a kind of more cautious way, it does seem to come back and punish us. So it is a bit of a salutary lesson, really. But if you would like to make a donation to UNICEF to send a vaccination to somewhere in the world like India, which is really struggling because there is a kind of a lack of balance. Some developed countries like Britain have obviously done very well with the vaccinations, and that's to be applauded, but it does mean that there are other people, certainly in Africa, that aren't getting vaccinations at all. So if you'd like to join with us and make a contribution to UNICEF for a vaccine, please see the link beneath this video and you can do that. But in terms of the wider astrology, so we have the lunation, the eclipse, actually interacting with that right angle between Uranus and Saturn. So I do feel that when there's resistance to change, which is coming through Uranus and Taurus, and Saturn in Aquarius is asking us to be more progressive and more joined up in our thinking, they're both fixed signs, so they both resist change in some ways. That's the interesting paradox of Aquarius energy. Uranus, the modern ruler of Aquarius, is very much about shaking things up, but Aquarius people have a duality to them because the Saturnian energy can see them very traditional and preferring to stick with what they know. So there's a bit of a sort of constant energy flow between being progressive and staying traditional with Aquarius energy anyway. It's not all as progressive as you will read in popular columns in magazines. But we also have this week, a great link between the Sun and Mars. Now, if you remember, Mars moved into Cancer last week, and this week they're forging a sextile. So where we are very clear about how we're going to use our resources, how we're connected to other people, how we're flexing to deal with COVID and perhaps how it's impacted on our resources or our values, I think that we can gain a lot of motivation, a lot of drive to move forwards in a very pacey way. And if you've got it all worked out in terms of balancing the ins and outgoings of your resources, I think you could enjoy still some spontaneous expenditure because Uranus is about breaking free of restrictions. And I think certainly in the US and the UK, where there has been a lot of death earlier in COVID, really until quite recently, there's probably a great need to go out and be free and spend and have good food and good wine and splash out on some clothes. And that stuff appeals to Elisa and I just like anyone else. But we just need to be mindful that we're all citizens of the world. And one of the things that I think we all need to sort of be conscious of not being is almost like, well, it's okay for us in this country. It's almost like a COVID nationalism. I think it's despicable. We have to retain an awareness of how it is for everybody. And undoubtedly, the people who suffer most with COVID are those people who are least well off. That's because their living conditions will be more challenged. We've seen it in Brazil as well. A business friend of ours, Michelle, she lost her dad this week to COVID in Brazil. Probably totally preventable because the political will there was so popularist that, this is just a small flu that you're going to get over. Well, of course, Brazil has a soaring middle class, but it also has a huge level of poverty, and it will be those people like in India who have no oxygen. So, these aspects of this week may be looking a little bit brighter for us in Britain and America and parts of Europe, but they're quite shocking elsewhere. So we need to retain that global view. But I think in general, something can come into the open about a difference of opinions, a difference of values. Some secrets can very violently and powerfully come into the open. And I did predict at the start of the year, unfortunately with no great pleasure, that there would be big rock falls, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis. All these things will happen this year, unfortunately, because of this aspect, this square between Saturn and Uranus, with Uranus being in Taurus, which is very much about the Earth. So I think we just need to sort of stay mindful that we keep our awareness to the world beyond our own immediate situation, even if we can celebrate a bit more personal freedom. In our case, you know, we were able to go for a walk and have an outdoor drink last night, which was fantastic because we hadn't been out for about 9 months.
It felt like quite alien. I'd kind of forgotten what to do.
Yeah, you sort of felt really quite awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the place we went, they were actually managing it super well. That's the Vaults in Shrewsbury. So well done to Andy and his staff. The staff were absolutely fantastic. Yeah. So in terms of the word for the week, we have had one come in. It's come from Tim, and it is...
Well, the word... And just like to say thank you so much for your insights. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you, darling.
So the word for the week comes from Tim, like you said,
Tim
and
Pruitt.
It is catharsis. And it wasn't just us, but a few people commented on this word saying that's a great one. And it is. Thank you so much, Tim. So catharsis... what does it mean? Well, for me personally, it's almost like a purging of things that are deep within us that we need to get out. It's that feeling of having that shout and scream when we're full of angst, and then that feeling of like relief when it comes out. And I think so many of us across the world hold things in. But it's like, for example, you know, if we've lost a loved one, if we think about funerals, you know, I can only go from our experience here in the UK, usually quite somber events, but even if they're uplifting, they're still quite quiet, quite respectful. You go elsewhere to the Middle East and you'll find women wailing in the street for the loss of their loved one.
When I was a kid in Swindon, there was a massive Italian community. I went to a Catholic school, so a lot of people that I went to school with were Italians. And there was a part of Swindon called Ferndale, and a lot of Italian families live around there. And when people's partners died, they would wear black forever sometimes. Now, sometimes these days people would say that was too reverential, but one of the things I really dislike about grief, in Britain particularly, you have this kind of culture of, oh, get over it, I'll pull your socks up.
Yeah, oh, that's just life.
Oh, that's just life. Oh, huh. I mean, when my mum died, a neighbour said, oh well, to me. Oh well, my mother had just died. When my sister died, I said to another neighbour, how are you? My sister's just died. Oh, and just carried on walking. The British are absolutely dreadful at dealing with grief. So I agree with Elisa. You know, I think that's a really good one. I have stuff going on that, you know, is still very deep within me from my life that I need to perhaps ventilate more out. It's a very British thing, I feel, of keeping that sort of, you know, there is a dignity in terms of not a sort of, almost like it's become so fashionable to display grief. There are a lot of public figures that give you a running commentary on all the things that are going on in their life. So I read this morning one reality star has had a miscarriage. Well, I'm very, very sorry for her because I know how devastating that can be. But do you know, there must be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who have miscarriages every day. And there are certain things that perhaps are best kept a little more confidential. I'm not judging her for saying that, but there are some people who ventilate things on a minute-by-minute basis. And then there are other parts of culture where it's so zipped up, it's just so unhealthy.
Yeah. And it always can find its way out. I remember when my grandmother died, I'm still heavily grieving about that now, even, I think it'll be 8 years this year. She promised me it would get easier, and it does, but it's still there. And I remember...
You were so close though, weren't you?
Really close, but it was about a month afterwards, and I'd gone for a coffee with my mum, and I was just sat there and I just burst out crying. It was uncontrollable. I know that another lady who's a friend of mine lost her mother. She was shopping in the supermarket. You know, she was okay. She went to pick up a cucumber or tomatoes or whatever it was, and she just broke down. And sometimes these things can just, creep up on us. So how, what is a way that we can, how does catharsis work? Well, I think Tim came up with this quite a few weeks ago, where he suggested, you write these thoughts, feelings down, write it on some paper and burn it. We sometimes laugh because you did know somebody who that was their suggestion for a lot of things. But I think it really does make sense, and we were also talking yesterday on our walk about a lady who had been a survivor of an Auschwitz camp. And she actually wrote down a letter to one of the doctors that had done a lot of different tests and surgeries on her because she was a twin. And she got a dictionary. She found the most awful words that she could think of, and she wrote them down. And some people would shy away from that, in the New Age community, or whatever you want to call it. It's very much parts of it are about love and light, and that is great, but you can't have that without the shadow side of life. And so I think using bad words to have that catharsis is a good thing, and not something that we should just shy away from. The Dalai Lama came out last week and said he feels that anger is a very bad emotion. It was probably one of the only times I really disagreed with the Dalai Lama, because it's a human emotion. Let's not berate ourselves for feeling human feelings.
Yeah, obviously we all want to try and grab perspective, and to create a little bit of logic in situations when our emotions are so raw. But there are I feel a lot of people in very senior positions in society who actually in some ways could identify, to use that modern term, as being actually a little bit sociopathic. They actually don't have very much human empathy. And it's amazing, even in everyday conversations, how some people are such pinners. So they get hold of you and they tell you the latest thing that's usually about very, very, very sort of mundane things. And their desire to impress upon you their experience of these mundane issues is way beyond just saying things like, how's it going? How are you doing? That little bit of a brief exchange to check where somebody is something that a lot of people seem to have a real problem with doing. So I think that whole issue of emotion, what we're talking about here is expressing emotion authentically and having a right to do that, and not judging ourselves. If it is a bit out there, if it is a bit leery at times, if it is a bit undignified from the old upper, stiff upper lip way that things used to be, I think Southern Europeans generally can teach us a great deal about showing emotions. We were watching Inspector Montalbano last night. I don't know if you know the series, but I just loved the way they use their arms. Telling people.
It's expressive.
Yeah, my father's fought in Italy in the war, and he actually really loved Italian people, and he learnt Italian when he came back. He was in Austria through to 1946, which was really difficult. He was kept an extra year, which went back on a commitment the government had made. So they were building bridges in Austria, at first Germany and then Austria, to repair the damage of the war. But he never lost that love of Italian people, and it is that sort of like lovely warmth and sort of,
community.
Sort of fantastic. So that's wonderful. Yeah. Right, so we talked about the astrology, we talked about the Hermetic Wheel, we talked about the word. So, mailbag.
Yeah, so let's have a little look. So we did have one question from Nick. Again, thank you so much, Nick.
You are our serial mailer.
You are, I really appreciate it.
But please, could I just say, if you want a word of the week reflected upon, please suggest it. If you have any questions, please suggest them.
Okay, so Nick says, do you both have a favourite planet or planet combination? Also with the cards, do you have a favourite card or card combination? Who wants to go first?
Well, you were saying last night that you wanted to talk about Pluto, which I then sobbed in the corner because I really find Pluto the most fascinating of them. But it's fine, because in the night I thought it's okay. I'm going to move into Neptune territory. So I'll let Pluto go. Hey, that's really good, isn't it? Letting Pluto go.
I love Pluto because
Pluto!
For one, I love Greek mythology. So Hades is the god of the underworld. Often there's a misconception that he's the god of death, which isn't true because that's not his role. He's just the god of the underworld, which is not like a hellish place. It's a place of many levels. And what I like about Hades is he was probably one of the most loyal, faithful husbands in the Greek mythology series. Maybe a couple of affairs, but he is thousands of years old. But I think Pluto in general is about that transformation. Yes, it can be about destruction. Yes, it can be about death. Yes, it can be about sex and power. But it can also be about things changing, that transformational energy, which I just find so fascinating. I do also have a love of Jupiter, being a Sagittarius, for that expansion.
But also your midpoint between the sun and the moon is actually at 5 degrees in Pisces. So your midpoint is Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, just like Sagittarius. So
yeah. So the good part about Jupiter is I feel it can be very lucky. It can be about big things happening. But
just a traditional planet of fortune.
The downside is, there can be overindulgence that comes with Jupiter. Maybe too much love of food or drink.
People with moon conjunct Jupiter often have very round faces, a bit like those old-fashioned sort of like caricatures of the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of like sort of moon-faced moon. That's very Jupiter conjunct moon. And those people, Jupiter conjunct Venus, probably will be people who really love the good things in life, whether it's good food, good wine, or perhaps, nice possessions and a little bit of luxury.
As for my favourite card, Nick, I would say it would be the Two of Cups. It's a pip card, so it, isn't like one of the majors. But I think for me, the Two of Cups represents union, bond. It can represent true love, but it is also about respect, a deep mutual respect for somebody. So in business, it's great because it means you respect another person's viewpoints. And in a relationship, it's great because it means that you respect and love that person to be themselves, but also whilst having that deep communion together.
Yeah, and another sort of personal reveal here. I've never had a tattoo. I've never been somebody to wear jewellery, this is no judgment on anyone who does, wear bracelets, necklaces, rings, never had a tattoo. So anyway, when Elisa and I first met, I think she mentioned before, she kept getting the Two of Cups, plus the Ten of Cups, plus
the King of Swords.
The King of Swords, which... sort of an older or business associate potentially. But anyway, we went on holiday to North Wales, and I woke up and Elisa wasn't in the flat, and on Portmadoc Harbour there at Snowdon Wharf, and then came back and she said, "Oh, I've got a tattoo." So I said, "Oh, okay," because she already had some, and because I think tattoos have become much more popular. I mean, I'm not saying that tattoos didn't exist with people in the past, but very often people who had tattoos may have been mariners, for example. So, I've always been quite conservative about this kind of stuff. Anyway, big reveal, I had a tattoo. So we both had...
Branded.
I'm branded, the Two of Cups.
That's lovely. You got yours in navy. I got mine upside down because I'm dyslexic.
So yours looks like a bra.
So mine looks like a bra. But we got it.
So the Two of Cups. And another reveal, the name Arundel comes from the French word hirondelle, which means the flight of the swallows. So when we move, and we have got some news to share on that, we're going to actually have a tattoo done of the swallows.
Yay.
So each to cement our progress together.
I know, you're going to have a sleeve before you know it, Patrick.
Well, I don't know about that. Yes, it is interesting really, because I've just always felt I'm quite happy with the body that God gave me. Like everyone, I wish my tummy was a bit smaller. Not everyone, a lot of people wish my tummy was a bit smaller. Oh, thank you so much. And those various things, like one ear sticks out too much. There's various things that most of us have. But for a bit of a departure for me there, that's for sure.
Yeah, but it's something that we share, so that's lovely.
So in terms of my planets, wow, that's, yeah, I would just say about Pluto that if you are a cardinal sign, so in other words, if you're in Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, and you've got any planets that are towards the end of those signs, then I do feel that Pluto has had a massive impact on your situation in recent times. So that could be in terms of your ascendant, it could be your moon, it doesn't just have to be your sun. But in terms of Aries, it's a square, Cancer an opposition. So just to broadly summarise this, since 2008, I think Pluto will have had a massive impact on Aries people's careers. I think since 2008, Pluto had a massive impact on Cancer people's relationships, with maybe some big changes there. Perhaps some people have gone that were there quite strongly before 2008. And then for Libran people, and I have the ascendant at 23 degrees, so I've had the square with Pluto quite assertively over the last few years. It's been very much being more forceful about emotions and family, which has proved to be an incredibly painful process, because I'm someone who's kept my feelings largely to myself over a very long period of time. And I started to push back a little bit, and that has actually not worked well for me with those people. They haven't been able to deal with me expressing my truth, and I haven't expressed hardly 0.25% of what I could say. And so that's something I'm still considering, that I might write a book about it to share what I feel has been the impact. Pluto can be incredible. It can urge us to make changes when we can't see them. And sometimes if we embrace the need for change because we can see it, it will take us forwards in the most dramatic and positive of ways. But if we resist things, it can rip them off us. And sometimes it can rip them off us even when we don't want it to rip them off us. And it's a devastating process. But then when we look back on it, we realise actually it probably was for the best, because there was something that wasn't working. So Pluto, very, very powerful. So if you are a cardinal sign, I do think since 2008, on the moon, ascendant or sun, you have gone through something very profound. And if you have any positions, a late ascendant in Libra, a late sun in Libra or moon, you could still be going through that. The same in Aries, the same in Cancer, and the same in Capricorn. Now, in terms of my favourite card, oh, blimey, I hadn't really thought about that. So let's just throw one in there that everybody might find a bit surprising. Well, not everybody, people might find surprising. What about the Tower?
Ooh.
Because the Tower tends to come up when it's a bit Plutonian in a way, because maybe something gets revealed or something happens dramatic that we're not expecting, and it strips us of all our sense of serenity and security. I think the Tower is a card that I have immense respect for. I wouldn't say that I'd be particularly happy to get the Tower, but it obviously depends where it comes out in a particular reading. But it's certainly one to be immensely respectful of, I feel.
Yeah, bit of fear around it, but also a bit of like surprise and spontaneity. So if you do like your world being shaked up a bit, then the Tower can certainly do that. Yeah,
and on many of us don't. So I would say on the whole, most of us would have a great deal of reverence for the Tower, but not really affection, none, actually.
Yeah.
So that just comes up for me, Nick. But going back to, I had to come up with an alternative because Elisa pinched Pluto in typically Plutonian style, because if you've got Pluto, Mars in someone's chart in a harsh angle, so the 8th harmonic, so a conjunction, square or opposition, the chances of them being involved in something a bit dodgy, whether it's crime, drugs, forceful attitudes around sex or business or money making, that's very possible, to be quite honest. But I'm going to go for Neptune. Neptune is a planet that has had massive impact in its time going through the sign of Pisces, which it governs since 2012. I think in that time we've seen a huge explosion in drug use. I'm not saying that drug use wasn't going on before then, because obviously it has been growing. But we're not just talking about recreational drugs, we're talking about opioids crisis in America, where you can freely get prescribed painkillers. And apparently that is a massive, massive problem. And I'm sure it's a problem in the UK as well. I think our use of illicit drugs in Britain is the highest in Europe. And I do feel there's a direct correlation between very right-wing politics. Now, I'm probably going to get a sapload of opinions here, but I think very right-wing politics creates a lot of social vacuum and a lot of social breakdown and a lot of poverty. And I think where there's poverty, you will get drug taking. But then, of course, you will get people who are extremely well off will use cocaine because it makes them feel good and they feel they can, and it's part of their entitlement. But I don't have any great respect for people who use cocaine who are well off, because they're not thinking about the supply chain and the impact it has, the devastating impact it has on people who don't handle it as smartly as they do. So sorry, cocaine is a pretty poor drug, I would say. So Neptune has coincided in Pisces with this explosion in all sorts of drug taking, and I think it's to do with a need to escape the pain of how our lives are. You know, whether we drink a bit too much, which we've all done, or I've done, or whether we take medicines a little bit too much to dull our pain. I think the need for escapism has been very much characterised by Neptune going through the sign of Pisces. So it's a long transit, but I think in a natal horoscope it can throw up problems with issues of identity, because it can make people hypersensitive. So if you have Neptune in a positive way in your chart to the moon, or perhaps to Pluto or Jupiter, it could make you a seer, a psychic, someone who's got a third eye, someone who's very perceptive. If you've got it more negatively, like Moon conjunct Neptune, could leave people very confused, very, very unaware, or find it difficult to really know what their identity is. Again, it depends on what house it's in, and also the angles that are forged to other planets. It can be very healing, very kind, very gentle. So there's ups and downsides to all planetary aspects, but I would say that Neptune can be a very distorting influence, a very deluding influence. People can delude themselves with the reality of situations. I think we all have to try to find a bit more logic to go with the sensitivity of Neptune, but I also feel that we need to have proper emotion where we can let our moon energies actually breathe in and out. I was thinking about the pinning conversation we had yesterday with someone. When you're with a pinner, you can't breathe. Your lungs don't go in and out because they don't give you the time to share. There's no sharing. It's just pinning for their need to express their trivia. So I think the moon is very important to share our emotions, but the Neptune position is saying that sometimes we do have to protect ourselves from negative emotions and stay away from places or situations where we feel dark energy, or we get an instinct not to do something. But also Neptune can delude us about what reality is and can warp that reality, and even see people be downright dishonest, duplicitous to a very bad degree in relationships. So interesting. So I would go for Neptune as being my planet of the week, Nick, and it is a challenging planet, even if it does have amazing upsides in terms of spirituality, kindness, compassion, sacrifice, martyrdom in a positive way, but also it can make people feel invisible, that they don't count, that they've got no worth or purpose, and it can make people reach for ways of escapism which are not positive for us. Now, we didn't have a birthday winner, a birthday nomination, so nobody asked for their birthday chart to be analysed for this week commencing the 26th. And so somebody did write in and say, give their details. If you do want to enter this, all you have to do under your name is just put time, date, place of where you were born, and we'll pick it up off YouTube. If you'd rather keep your information confidential, then please just we'll drop the contact form under this video, and you can reach out to us and drop your details. But we'd prefer to do them on that birthday week because it's a bit of a gift for that person whose birthday it is. But anyway, so Elisa's picked the winner, and it's Shelley Walker of Hartlepool up in the northeast of England. And Shelley was born on the 4th of August in 1968. Now, interesting thing, Shelley, so you have the same date of birth, not the same year as Meghan Markle. And also, you're a monkey in Chinese horoscopes, which means that you can be a bit cheeky. I get on well with monkeys, but a bit cheeky. And you were born at 11:45 p.m. Now, your ascendant means that it was at 25 degrees in Taurus. So, although you were born as a Leo, your ascendant is Taurus. So, both are fixed signs, so maybe there has been a little bit of a need for a degree of stability in your life. So what's going on in your situation? Let's just have a quick look around your nativity. As usual, I haven't had the time to look at it. So when you were born, you had, let's see, So you had Saturn in a wonderful angle with Venus. And Venus is actually in your 5th house, which means it's in Leo, so that gives you a wonderful sort of attractiveness. And you also have Jupiter in your 5th house. It's in Virgo, which is not its greatest location, but I think you have an enjoyment probably around children, and I think around your relationships. I think with Saturn being in your 12th house, I do feel that there's been some sadness around certain relationships in your life, certain betrayals. Perhaps not everybody has been quite up to the standard that you would like, but I think perhaps your children or one of them has provided some rich compensations. Now, it just turns out that your ascendant is in a square with Venus, so there's probably been times when you've really liked someone and it seemed to be that they were the real deal. And it probably had rich promise. I feel that when Leo energy loves, it loves big and it loves loud. And of course, it's not just your sun. You also have Mercury as well as Venus in the sign of Leo. So you're someone with a real sense of where you would want to direct your affection and warmth, particularly because your sun, Mercury, and also Mars, although that's in Cancer, are all in your 4th house. So you're going to be a home lover, but you're a home lover who's probably like to have people around from time to time. Perhaps that Saturn in the 12th house has made you over time a little more wary around trust issues, if there has been situations where you have felt hurt. What I would tell you, however, is that you do have Mars at 29 degrees in Cancer in the 4th house. So remember, I just said that anyone who's got a major planet in a cardinal sign is going to be affected by Pluto. So over the next few years, there's going to be a big change about where you live. It will happen between now and 2024. I can almost absolutely guarantee that. Or it's possible that in terms of your work, with the move in Pluto in the sky in your 10th house, there's been a lot of potential challenges around your work, or work has had an impact on where you're living. But you do have in your chart, I must stress, your moon's in Sagittarius, and that forges an almost perfect link to your Venus and Saturn position. So you have a grand fire trine at the root of your being. The moon's in the 8th house, which gives you psychological understanding, love of philosophy. Could make you a bit nervous at times, but it does forge a perfect link with Saturn and also Venus. So where you love deep, and the people that you really feel are absolutely, totally, 100% loyal, you would never, ever let those people down. But then sadly, I do feel there probably has been some disappointments in love for you in your life. In terms of where your charts evolved to, in terms of your progressed chart, you do have, when you were born, you had Neptune on the 7th house cusp. So I think you're a very sensitive person around relationships. And in your progressions, Neptune has actually moved forward slightly. It's still just nibbling on your 7th house cusp. But you have had the moon, the progressed moon, moved across your Neptune and 7th house cusp over the last 5 months. I don't know what's happened, but I would imagine an incredibly sensitive point has happened around a key relationship over the last 5 months. And I think it has perhaps been something that you've had an opportunity to grow through, but because of that hypersensitivity of Neptune and the moon, maybe a relationship issue has been quite to the fore. I wouldn't like to say it was a separation. I think that would be possible, but it could be that there's been some kind of unity that you've reached. If Saturn was on that 7th house, strangely enough, I would actually, if it was moving across your 7th house, even though some astrologers would say, well, that would be the end of a relationship, and I would say that in some cases too, often when Saturn's just about to move over the 7th house on a directed or progressed position, it can be, or even a transit, when people forge a very deep, light, long-lasting bond. Please do not see Saturn as always being bad and very difficult. However, what I would tell you is that in your progress chart, you do have Venus and Mercury in Libra at 28 and 29 degrees, and therefore they are forging a T-square in fact they're forging a grand cross with your natal Saturn, the moving Pluto in the sky, your 10th house, and the position of Mars in your natal chart. So I do feel, having looked at that position of Venus and Mercury, that something significant has changed around the relationship, and I would suspect it hasn't been particularly easy, I'm sorry. If something has transformed for the better, I would be absolutely thrilled. The way I work as an astrologer is very interactive. It's a conversation. It's not hierarchical. If you ever want a reading with me, or even Elisa, we both work the same way. It's not about us being in some kind of elite position. It's actually us as fellow travellers working with you, and we're just, if you like, conduits. The energy's flowing through us to help people find what's right for them. So without the feedback from Shelley, I can't say for sure. What I would say is that your progressed sun is now in Libra. It has been for the last 3.5 years, and I think that has given you a new desire to create greater balance and equilibrium in your world. So if something has changed around a relationship, it's because you're refusing to put up with something that isn't respecting your boundaries. That's absolutely certain. In terms of your progressed ascendant, that's at 18 degrees in the sign of Cancer. And that means, therefore, I'm just looking at the maths, so that means that Pluto's in your 7th house. So maybe something good has come in or is about to come in, and it will be in your 7th house for some time. So I hope that makes sense, Shelley. I can't do a solar return for you for your birthday on the 4th of August, because that kind of defeats the object of why we're trying to get people to write in for the birthday forecast, because that makes it more interactive to the show for that week. Now, we have also got some news. So, if you've been following our story as a patron, thank you so much. We've got another patron join this week. We so appreciate your donations. And if you'd like to become a patron, please see the link that Elisa is flashing up on the screen now. But we have got some news on where we're going to live.
Yay! So we have found our house. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but this house was kind of like, if you watch any of the housey shows, some of them have like the mystery property that you go and see. Which you
don't think you've got great expectations.
Yeah, so we didn't have great expectations really on this house. We didn't know what it was about. We had different targets. The other targets didn't work out.
I'm unfortunately, Lisa, I'm a bit of an absolute obsessive about Georgian and Victorian property. Yeah. And we have actually probably ended up getting something that's older than Victorian, but I just love the grandness of them.
Yeah,
and
you're Victorian.
We had opportunities, we could have gone for them, but we just decided it was too much work after all the work we've put in here, and we just didn't want to go through that process again. No. Because even though perhaps we could have done it, we had the experience now and perhaps even a bit of budget to do it, we're looking for somewhere for Elisa's mum as well. That was a consideration. But also it's just, did we want all that hard graft?
Yeah, no, not after everything we've been through. So we picked this mystery property. Didn't think that we would fall in love with it, really. Had a little look outside it, wasn't sure.
Still didn't get the vibe.
Still didn't get the vibe. Walked in, and my heart was just like, ah. I was so happy.
But the property market in Britain at the moment is just insane because the government introduced some stamp duty. It's a tax levy that is on property transactions at the start of the COVID crisis, and they extended it a while ago. But also it's because of COVID, people are working from home more. They want more space at home. It's called the race for space. We have quite a big house, and when we extended it, it's got 5 bedrooms. It's got a huge family room. You know, you've got space for offices, lots of broadband action, all that good stuff. That's what people want. So typically about 25% of properties in Britain are actually getting multiple offers, and it has to go to full and final offer. And that's what happened on this one. So we actually had to pay more for it. Otherwise we wouldn't have got it.
And it's smaller, a lot. Well, yeah, it is smaller.
It is smaller than here, but we can actually see ways that we can make it bigger in a more affordable and efficient way than if we'd gone for the Victorian properties that we were looking at.
Yes, so we have a little cottage, and I'm sure there are fairies in
It's
the
only
garden.
10% smaller than
it's only
here.
10%.
And this is a big house.
Yeah, so really excited to get going. So hopefully in a few weeks' time we will be moving. We could give you a little tour, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. We're not so keen on the colour of it, either in or out.
No.
And sadly, the vendor has died, so her possessions are all still in situ, and that's obviously a tragic situation for her and her family and friends. But so there could be a little bit of time for allow that to happen as well. But it is in a completely different location. We are moving to Wales. We're moving to West Wales. It's a part of Wales about 55% of people speak Welsh as their first language, so we will be learning Welsh the best we can.
Yes.
And we're about a mile from the sea, from a beach, which our patrons have actually seen us filming on about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And then we thought the property that we'd gone for at that time, well, we did go for it again last week, but our offer was refused, and we just thought, no, this is just going to be too much hard work. And so we're going to share a film of the area underneath this video. We can't put it in the video because there may be some copyright issues. So it will be underneath this video if you want to go and see the area that we're moving to in West Wales. So it's a different country, different culture, by the sea, but near the amazing River Teifi and the Teifi estuary. There's waterfalls, there's natural swimming around there, there's castles. There's lots of very good fish, obviously. There's a fish that neither of us have eaten that's very local to that area called the sewin. So we're both interested to try that.
Yes.
And so we've got a lot to learn. And we're going to do a lot of cycling, a lot of swimming.
We're going to get a canoe, maybe.
Hopefully get in a canoe. So it's going to be, you can see a different energy from us today. We've been slogging through all the changes in this house. We've had loads of builders in. Obviously it's been risky with COVID. It's been a lot of expenditure. There's all the planning, the structural engineer, the steels, because we had to have 5 big steels. It's been a very complex process. And to finally get a result, it probably doesn't meet every one of our needs. But as they say on these shows, you have to compromise a bit. We're just losing a couple of bedrooms, but we feel that we can find a way to get 2 of the 5 that we have now back. So so that's it.
So that's where we are.
So we'll share pictures of the house to our patrons, but we'll share pictures or a film of the area to everyone by seeing the link below. That wraps up this week's show. We do hope that you can write in with more word suggestions. Your birthday for week commencing the 3rd of May, so we can work on that for you. Have a wonderful lunar eclipse. Remember, it can see revelations, it can see shocks, it can see more drama around sexual matters with public figures or financial matters, fraud, where there's been collusion, where there's been bungs, corruption, all that kind of stuff. It's all coming out into the open, more to come. And in terms of your week, we hope you have a great week. And from the 18 it is.
Goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from her. Goodbye.